of all, I plead innocent of all charges.
Is your wife Priscilla with you?
No, she's not.
Elvis, why did you start making public appearances again?
I just missed it.
There's a locked trunk sitting in the attic of Graceland that nobody was supposed to open. For over 60 years, it sat untouched, buried beneath decades of dust, forgotten costumes, and the kind of clutter that accumulates when a legend dies too young and the people left behind don't know what to keep and what to let go. But during a routine estate inventory in late 2022, just months before Lisa Marie Presley's sudden death, someone finally pried it open. And what they found inside wasn't memorabilia or stage props or forgotten gold records. It was something far more valuable and far more devastating. It was a collection of handwritten letters from Gladys Presley to her son Elvis, written during the years when his fame exploded and her health collapsed. And these letters reveal a side of the Elvis story that no biography, no documentary, and no Hollywood film has ever told. Gladys Presley wasn't just Elvis's mother. She was his universe. From the moment he was born in that two-room shotgun house in Tupelo, Mississippi, she poured every ounce of her love, her hope, and her protection into that boy. Elvis had a twin brother, Jesse Guerin, who was stillborn, and Gladys never recovered from that loss. She clung to Elvis like he was breathing for both of them. She called him her precious boy. He called her his baby. They had a bond that went beyond mother and son. It was obsessive, codependent, and so intense that even as an adult, Elvis would climb into bed with her when he was scared or lonely. He didn't just love his mama, he worshipped her. And she knew him better than anyone ever would. But when Elvis became famous, everything changed. Suddenly, her boy wasn't hers anymore. He belonged to the world. He belonged to screaming teenagers, to Colonel Tom Parker, to Hollywood executives, to everyone except the woman who raised him. And Gladys saw what was happening. She saw the vultures circling. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes. She saw him being pulled further and further away from the person he used to be. And she tried to warn him. That's what these letters are. They're not sweet notes from a proud mother. They're desperate pleas from a woman who could see the future and was powerless to stop it. The first letter in the collection is dated April 1956, just months after Elvis's breakthrough. He was on the road constantly, performing nearly every night, being mobbed everywhere he went. The fame was intoxicating, and Elvis was riding the wave like he was invincible. But Gladys wasn't celebrating. She was terrified. In that letter, written in her shaky, unpolished handwriting, she tells him, "My son, I'm scared for you. You don't see what I see. They don't love you. They love what you can give them." She wasn't talking about the fans. She was talking about the people in his inner circle. The ones who stood to profit from his success. The ones who whispered in his ear and made him believe he needed them. Gladys didn't trust any of them. And as it turns out, she was right not to. What makes these letters so heartbreaking is that Elvis didn't listen. He couldn't. He was too young, too ambitious, too caught up in the whirlwind to realize that his mother wasn't being overprotective or paranoid. She was being prophetic. In letter after letter, she begs him to slow down, to come home, to remember who he was before the fame. She tells him that all the money and all the screaming fans won't mean anything if he loses himself in the process. She warns him about the people who smile to his face and plot behind his back. She even mentions specific names, people who were part of his team, people who history would later reveal were bleeding him dry. But Elvis brushed it off. He sent her reassuring replies, told her not to worry, promised her that everything was under control. He thought he was protecting her from the stress. In reality, he was ignoring the only person who truly had his best interests at heart. And then there's the health aspect. Gladys's letters from 1957 and early 1958 show a woman who is falling apart. She writes about feeling weak, about struggling to breathe, about not being able to sleep because she's so worried about her son. She mentions chest pains and dizzy spells, but she downplays them because she doesn't want Elvis to feel guilty. She doesn't want to add to his burden. But reading those letters now, knowing that she would be dead by August of 1958, is absolutely gut-wrenching. Because you can see it happening in real time. You can see a mother sacrificing her own well-being because she's too consumed with trying to save her son. And you can see Elvis, thousands of miles away, completely unaware that he's running out of time to listen. The tragedy of these letters isn't just what they say, it's what they represent. They represent a mother's intuition that was ignored. They represent a warning that went unheeded. They represent the last chance Elvis had to change course before the machinery of fame swallowed him whole. And they were hidden away for over 6 decades, locked in a trunk, kept from the public and even from the family, because someone along the way decided they were too raw, too personal, too damaging to the carefully constructed myth of Elvis Presley. But now they're out. And the truth they contain is more powerful than any legend ever could be. The letters Gladys wrote weren't vague motherly concerns or generic warnings about staying humble. They were specific, detailed, and chillingly accurate predictions about what would destroy her son. She named names. She called out behavior. She identified threats that Elvis was too blinded by loyalty and ambition to recognize. And reading them now, more than 60 years later, feels like watching a slow-motion tragedy where every warning sign was waving right in front of everyone's face, and no one did a damn thing to stop it. One of the most striking letters dates back to late 1956, right around the time Colonel Tom Parker was tightening his grip on Elvis's career. Gladys never liked the Colonel. She didn't trust his smile, his promises, or the way he treated her son like a product instead of a person. In this particular letter, she writes, "That man doesn't care about you, baby. He cares about what you can make him. Don't sign anything else until you come home and we talk." But Elvis had already signed. He'd already handed over control. And by the time Gladys put pen to paper, it was too late. Parker had negotiated deals that would lock Elvis into contracts for decades. Deals that stripped him of creative freedom and funneled a staggering percentage of his earnings straight into Parker's pocket. Gladys saw it happening before the ink was even dry. But Elvis thought she just didn't understand the business. He thought she was being old-fashioned and overly cautious. He had no idea she was reading the situation more clearly than anyone in that room full of sharks. More than 90% of the people watching this video right now still aren't subscribed, and that means most people are missing out on exclusive, untold stories about Elvis Presley you won't find anywhere else. If you don't want to miss the next revelation, now's the time. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video with one friend. Now let's continue. And it wasn't just Parker. Gladys also warned Elvis about the people he surrounded himself with. The so-called Memphis Mafia, the entourage of childhood friends and hangers on who followed him everywhere. She loved that her son was loyal. She loved that he took care of the people from his past. But she also saw how some of them were using him. In a letter from early 1957, she tells him, "You're too good, Elvis. You think everyone loves you the way I do. But they don't. Some of them just love what you give them." She was talking about the guys who lived rent-free at Graceland, who drove the cars he bought them, who partied on his dime and never questioned a single decision he made because it wasn't in their interest to rock the boat. They needed Elvis to keep being Elvis, even if it killed him. And Gladys could see that dependency forming. She could see her son becoming isolated inside a bubble of yes men who would never tell him the truth. But the most devastating letters are the ones where Gladys talks about her own failing health and what it means for Elvis's future. By 1958, she was deteriorating fast. Her liver was shot from years of undiagnosed hepatitis. compounded by alcoholism that she developed as a way to cope with the anxiety of watching her son's life spiral out of her control. She knew she didn't have much time left, and in those final letters, the tone shifts from warning to pleading. She writes, "Elvis, baby, please don't let them take you from me. I won't be here much longer, and I'm afraid of who you'll become when I'm gone." She wasn't just afraid of dying. She was afraid of what would happen to him without her there to protect him. She was the only person in his life who had no agenda, no angle, no ulterior motive. She loved him unconditionally, and she knew that once she was gone, there would be no one left to tell him no. No one left to pull him back. No one left to see through the lies. Elvis was in the Army when Gladys died on August 14th, 1958. He'd been granted emergency leave, and he made it back to Memphis just in time to see her before she slipped away. But those final days were a blur of grief and guilt. Friends who were there said Elvis was inconsolable. He threw himself on her casket, sobbing, saying he'd give anything to trade places with her. He told people he'd never forgive himself for not being there more, for not listening when she begged him to slow down. And after the funeral, something inside him broke permanently. The joy, the innocence, the light that had made him magnetic, it dimmed. He came back from the Army a different man. Harder, more withdrawn. More willing to numb the pain with pills and distractions. Gladys had been his anchor, and without her, he drifted. What makes these letters so unbearable to read is the realization that Gladys knew exactly what was going to happen. She predicted the exploitation, the loneliness, the self-destruction. She saw it all coming, and she tried to stop it with the only weapon she had: her words. But words on paper couldn't compete with the machinery of fame. They couldn't compete with the colonel's contracts, or the entourage's enablement, or the relentless demand for more performances, more movies, more everything. Elvis loved his mother more than anyone or anything in this world. But he didn't love her enough to listen. And that failure, that one tragic miscalculation, set the course for everything that came after. Gladys Presley died believing her son was headed for disaster. And she was right. The letters prove it. Every warning she gave, every fear she expressed, every danger she identified, it all came true. And the saddest part is that Elvis spent the rest of his life trying to fill the void she left behind, and he never could. Because the one person who truly saw him, who truly knew him, who truly loved him without condition, was gone. And no amount of fame, money, or adoration could ever bring her back. Gladys Presley died in 1958, but her prophecy didn't. It unfolded exactly as she predicted, step by step, year by year, until the boy she tried to save became the broken man the world mourned in 1977. Everything she feared came to pass, and the cruelest part is that Elvis knew it was happening. He just didn't know how to stop it. Because once Gladys was gone, there was no one left who could reach him. No one left who loved him more than they loved what he represented. And the people who filled that void weren't protectors. They were profiteers. Colonel Tom Parker wasted no time. With Gladys out of the picture, there was no one left to question his decisions or slow down the relentless pace he set for Elvis's career. The moment Elvis returned from the Army in 1960, Parker had him locked into a grueling schedule of film after film, most of them forgettable, formulaic cash grabs that traded on Elvis's name and nothing else. Elvis hated it. He wanted to be a serious actor. He wanted to make movies that mattered, movies he could be proud of. But Parker didn't care about pride. He cared about profit. And every time Elvis tried to push back, Parker reminded him of the contracts he'd signed, the money he owed, the machine that depended on him to keep running. Gladys had warned him about this exact scenario. She told him not to sign anything without her. She told him Parker would own him. And now he was trapped. playing the same character in different costumes, singing songs that insulted his talent, watching his artistic dreams die one bad script at a time. Then there was the loneliness. Gladys had predicted that too. She knew that fame would isolate her son, that he'd be surrounded by people but utterly alone. And she was right. Graceland became a gilded cage. Elvis filled it with friends, with cars, with animals, with anything that could distract him from the emptiness. The Memphis Mafia was always around, always laughing, always ready to party. But none of them challenged him. None of them told him the truth. They were dependent on him for their livelihoods, for their identities, for their proximity to greatness. So when Elvis started taking pills to sleep, pills to wake up, pills to perform, pills to numb the grief that never went away, they didn't stop him. They enabled him. They got the pills for him. They normalized it. Because a medicated Elvis was still a functioning Elvis, and a functioning Elvis kept the gravy train running. And the women. Gladys had been wary of the women in Elvis's life, particularly Priscilla. She'd met Priscilla only briefly before she died, but even in that short time, she sensed something off. Priscilla was young, moldable, and seemed more interested in the idea of Elvis than the reality of him. Gladys never got to see how that relationship would play out. But if she had, it would have confirmed every instinct she had. Priscilla became another form of control, another person who wanted Elvis to be a certain way, to fit a certain image. She didn't know the boy from Tupelo. She only knew the king. And when Elvis couldn't live up to that impossible standard, when the cracks started to show, she left. Just like Gladys feared. Just like she warned him would happen. But the worst part, the part that would have destroyed Gladys if she'd lived to see it, was watching Elvis lose himself completely. By the late 1960s, he was a shell of the man he used to be. The comeback special in 1968 gave the world a glimpse of the fire that was still inside him, but behind the scenes, he was falling apart. The pills were no longer occasional. They were constant. His weight fluctuated wildly. His mood swung from manic highs to crushing lows. He became paranoid, isolated, and increasingly disconnected from reality. And the people around him just kept feeding the machine, booking more shows, scheduling more tours, squeezing every last drop of profit out of a man who was barely holding on. There's a moment that haunts everyone who studies Elvis's life. It's from the early 1970s during one of his Las Vegas residencies. A reporter asked him if he was happy. And Elvis, sweating under the stage lights, exhausted from performing twice a night, looked directly at the camera and said, "I don't know what that word means anymore." That's what Gladys had been afraid of, that her son would achieve everything the world told him to want and still end up empty. That he'd be surrounded by people and die alone. That the fame she watched consume him would leave nothing but a name and a memory. And then there's Lisa Marie. Gladys never got to meet her granddaughter, but in a strange twist of fate, Lisa Marie became the person who understood Elvis's pain better than anyone. She grew up in the shadow of his ghost, raised in the same Graceland that had imprisoned him, surrounded by the same people who had failed him. And according to sources close to the family, Lisa Marie found some of Gladys's letters years before she died. She read her grandmother's warnings. She saw the roadmap of her father's destruction laid out in fading ink. And it changed everything for her. She realized that Elvis wasn't just a victim of fame. He was a son who lost his compass, a boy who ignored the only person who could have saved him. And that realization gave her a kind of clarity about her own life, her own struggles, and the legacy she was carrying. Gladys Presley saw the future in 1956 and tried to rewrite it with love. But love wasn't enough. And by the time Elvis understood what he'd lost, it was too late to get it back. These letters weren't discovered by accident. They were found during an estate inventory conducted by professionals who understood the historical significance of what they were holding. And the moment they read the first page, they knew this wasn't just family correspondence. This was a historical document that could fundamentally shift how the world understands Elvis Presley. Because for decades, the narrative has been controlled by a very specific group of people. By Priscilla, by the Colonel's estate, by Hollywood, by everyone except the people who actually knew him. But Gladys's letters cut through all of that. They're the voice of someone who had nothing to gain by lying, nothing to protect except her son's soul. And that authenticity is dangerous to the people who've built empires on a carefully curated version of Elvis's life. What makes these letters matter now, in 2024, is that they offer a mirror for our entire culture. We live in a world obsessed with fame, where young people are being groomed and packaged and sold before they're old enough to understand what's happening to them. We watch influencers, musicians, actors, athletes, all getting consumed by the machinery of celebrity, all losing themselves to the relentless demand for content, for performance, for more. And Gladys's warnings about exploitation and isolation and the predatory nature of fame, they don't feel like historical footnotes anymore. They feel urgent. They feel current. They feel like a message from the past that we desperately need to hear in the present. Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter, reportedly read every single letter in that trunk. And according to people close to her, it was a profound and painful experience. Because Riley didn't just learn about her grandfather's suffering. She learned about patterns. She learned about how trauma gets passed down through families. She learned that her mother's struggles with fame and addiction weren't personal failures. They were inherited wounds. Lisa Marie spent her entire life trying to escape the shadow of her father, trying to reclaim some sense of normalcy, trying to protect her own children from the same fate. And those letters explained why. They showed her that Lisa Marie wasn't born destined for pain. She was born into it. She inherited the damage that fame had inflicted on Elvis, and she spent the rest of her life trying to survive it. Reading Gladys's warnings gave Lisa Marie a kind of absolution, and it gave Riley a kind of clarity. Riley understood, perhaps for the first time, that she wasn't just the granddaughter of a legend. She was the inheritor of a curse. She was the latest generation in a family that had been broken by the machinery of celebrity. But unlike her grandfather and her mother, Riley had the advantage of Gladys's voice. She had the letters. She had proof that the pattern wasn't inevitable. She had documentation that someone in her family had seen it coming and tried to stop it. And that realization changed how Riley approached her own life, her own responsibilities, and her own role in protecting the Presley legacy. Because that's really what these letters are about. They're not just a mother's diary or a historical curiosity. They're a blueprint for understanding what it means to be protective in a world that doesn't reward protection. Gladys couldn't stop the Colonel. She couldn't control the fans. She couldn't rewrite the contracts or undo the decisions that had already been made. But she tried. With every letter, with every warning, with every desperate plea, she tried. And that effort matters. That love matters. The fact that she saw the danger and named it, even knowing that her son wouldn't listen, even knowing she wouldn't be there to see it through, that matters profoundly. What's happening now with Riley is a kind of continuation of what Gladys started. Riley is trying to protect her grandfather's legacy in ways that would have made Gladys proud. She's trying to keep the family together in the aftermath of her mother's death. She's trying to honor the wishes of people who can no longer speak for themselves. She's trying to make sure that the truth about Elvis, the real truth, the one Gladys knew and documented, doesn't get buried under layers of mythology and commercialization. And in doing that, Riley is breaking the cycle that destroyed her grandfather and nearly destroyed her mother. She's listening to the warnings. She's learning from the past. She's choosing protection over profit, family over fame. The tragedy of Gladys's letters is that they came too late for Elvis. He couldn't hear them while he needed to hear them most. He was too young, too caught up, too dependent on the very people she was warning him about. But they're not too late for us. They're not too late for everyone watching this, wondering what we should be protecting our children from, what we should be warning them about, what systems are designed to exploit them, and how we can stand in the way. Gladys Presley was just a woman from Tupelo, Mississippi, with a 9th grade education and no power in the entertainment industry. But she saw clearly. She loved fiercely. And she tried to save her son with the only weapon she had, the truth written in her own hand. That matters. In a world full of lies and narratives and carefully constructed images, Gladys's letters are a reminder that authentic love always sees what's real. A mother's intuition will always recognize danger before a contract will. And the people who truly care about you will always try to protect you, even when you're not ready to listen. Riley understood, perhaps for the first time, that she wasn't just the granddaughter of a legend. She was the inheritor of a curse. She was the latest generation in a family that had been broken by the machinery of celebrity. But unlike her grandfather and her mother, Riley had the advantage of Gladys's voice. She had the letters. She had proof that the pattern wasn't inevitable. She had documentation that someone in her family had seen it coming and tried to stop it. And that realization changed how Riley approached her own life, her own responsibilities, and her own role in protecting the Presley legacy. Because that's really what these letters are about. They're not just a mother's diary or a historical curiosity. They're a blueprint for understanding what it means to be protective in a world that doesn't reward protection. Gladys couldn't stop the Colonel. She couldn't control the fans. She couldn't rewrite the contracts or undo the decisions that had already been made. But she tried. With every letter, with every warning, with every desperate plea, she tried. And that effort matters. That love matters. The fact that she saw the danger and named it, even knowing that her son wouldn't listen, even knowing she wouldn't be there to see it through, that matters profoundly. What's happening now with Riley is a kind of continuation of what Gladys started. Riley is trying to protect her grandfather's legacy in ways that would have made Gladys proud. She's trying to keep the family together in the aftermath of her mother's death. She's trying to honor the wishes of people who can no longer speak for themselves. She's trying to make sure that the truth about Elvis, the real truth, the one Gladys knew and documented, doesn't get buried under layers of mythology and commercialization. And in doing that, Riley is breaking the cycle that destroyed her grandfather and nearly destroyed her mother. She's listening to the warnings. She's learning from the past. She's choosing protection over profit, family over fame. The tragedy of Gladys's letters is that they came too late for Elvis. He couldn't hear them while he needed to hear them most. He was too young, too caught up, too dependent on the very people she was warning him about. But they're not too late for us. They're not too late for everyone watching this, wondering what we should be protecting our children from, what we should be warning them about, what systems are designed to exploit them, and how we can stand in the way. Gladys Presley was just a woman from Tupelo, Mississippi, with a 9th grade education and no power in the entertainment industry. But she saw clearly. She loved fiercely. And she tried to save her son with the only weapon she had, the truth written in her own hand. That matters. In a world full of lies and narratives and carefully constructed images, Gladys's letters are a reminder that authentic love always sees what's real. A mother's intuition will always recognize danger before a contract will. And the people who truly care about you will always try to protect you, even when you're not ready to listen. Elvis didn't listen. And it cost him everything. But Lisa Marie listened, eventually, and Riley is listening now. And maybe that's the real legacy of Gladys Presley. Not that she failed to save her son, but that her voice endured long enough to save her granddaughter. What do you think Gladys would say if she could see her family now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If these letters hit you like they hit me, subscribe right now and hit that bell. Because this story doesn't end here. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you.